get started. The bell rang. I'm on. It's a conspiracy against you, George. Tim, can you give me a little more volume? How about now? Mike Hughes, here. Tim, can you turn the volume up just a little bit? Mike Hughes, can you hear? Mike Hughes, can you hear me now? Mike Hughes. Tim's working on the volume. I'm on the yellow one, Tim. How about now, Tim? No. How about now? No. This one's dead. Oh, yeah, because I can't sing. You want me to do another one?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Thanks. Appreciate it. How about now? That good? Okay. Okay, I think we're online now. little bit. It's an update. How's that? That's better. Okay. To everybody online, we think we've got it, and everybody here, we believe we've got it. Okay. This Sunday is Christmas Eve, December 24th, so due to many people traveling, we're not going to have Bible classes that morning, but we will have our worship service at 10. There will be some fellowship starting about 9 o'clock with donuts, coffee, orange juice in the all-purpose building before, it says AC. Is that the Activity Center? Is that the big building? Okay. Before heading over for worship. The Morrilton Children's Home Food Truck will be here Wednesday, December the 27th for their quarterly food pickup. The items needed are Velveeta, mustard, ketchup, and Febreze. There is also a list on the table in the back, on the back and the bulletin board. There will be a wedding shower for Cliff Chafin and Ashlyn Quisenberry on Sunday, January the 21st, 2024 at 1:30 at the home of Jan Penrod, and they are registered at Amazon and Target. There will be no ladies' chat this month. Leah Goodsill requests prayers for her uncle, Charlie Carradine. Did I say that right? Is Leah here? Did I say that correct? And Aunt Edna Fay. Charlie is very sick in the ICU at Saline Memorial. Tim Jorgensen's brother Eric has been diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, which has spread to his stomach and liver. And there's other news on the website. And so we'll get started. Just I did email out a handout and a link to a blog with complete notes, and I just got a question a few minutes ago, what are we supposed to do with that? The handout is just like 2 pages, and it's just, you know, if you want to print something out and have in your hand. The link is for an extensive blog of about 10 pages. The only difference is the blog has all the verbiage of all the verses and everything. So it's really there if you want to just follow along on your phone or your tablet here in the auditorium, and you can see all the scriptures right there on your phone. It's really not conducive to print out because it's about 10 pages and you don't need all that. And the handout, the attachment that's the Word document, is just what I passed out today. I hope that helps. Also, Jonathan helped me set up in the Summers app, and so the email is coming out through the app. And so I'm doing that because, as you well know, for you folks that use email, there's tons of spam email, and it's all designed to get your information and commit fraud. And so the emails will be coming out through the Summers app, and so I'm hoping that will cut down on some of this spam stuff that you get. I mean, I'm getting an email from someone that I know personally died 4 years ago, but I'm getting email from them. And it's just because these groups buy up email addresses and then they just use them. So anyway, hopefully that will do that. The YouTube and the Facebook feed are going, so I'll be looking for comments coming through on the YouTube chat. And if I get a comment there, I'll share with y'all. And if y'all give comments, I'll repeat it so that they can hear the full comment to help include everyone. So anyway, all righty. So this week we'll really be in chapter 1. But remember last week I started out with the quote from Albert Einstein, "I shall never believe God plays dice with the world." God always has a plan, always. There's always a plan. We may not know what that plan is. And if you go back, read through the Old Testament, I'm sure for many years Joseph didn't know he was part of the plan. and all the things that he went through. And other prophets didn't know exactly what part they played. We don't know what part we play so often. But one of the things I wanted to show is that there was a plan in place that God announced to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, and he carried that forward, and Exodus is culmination of part of that plan, which is to have a nation so that he can have a nation to bring the Messiah through. And so we'll see that as we go through. And part of that also is to see the shadows of the good thing that was to come we see the glimpses of the shadows in places like Exodus, and we don't really see the full impact of that until we get into the New Testament. So we'll talk about some of that. Another thing to remember, those of us who have ever had a plan at work, your boss says, I want you to get this new business line going. You know that there are several steps that have to happen. You just don't go, okay, I have a new business line to go through. Or if you're going to build a house, you know there's a long process before you actually get to move in. We need to think like that as we go through here. God is putting steps in place to accomplish the plan, which was the ultimate coming of Jesus thousands of years after this. And so these people involved here, they didn't know all of that. We don't know what holds the future for us either, but there's always steps, and so we are seeing the steps of God's plan. We get to look backwards and see that, and that's a real benefit and I think a plus for us. So if you start in Genesis 12, God tells Abraham, I want you out of here, I want you to move, I want you to go somewhere else. If you look at the first 3 verses, in verse 3 he says, in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. And if I'm Abraham, I'm going, okay, I got faith, I'll do it, but I don't really know what all that means. Down in verse 7, he says, to your descendants I'll give this land. He probably understood that, okay, my people are going to end up here. He didn't know it was going to be hundreds of years later until, well, God told him later. Then in Genesis 15, and I've given you the verse on your handout, there's a dream, and Abraham's sleeping, and he lays down, and he says, your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs. They will be enslaved, oppressed for 400 years. I will judge that nation whom they serve, and they will come out with many possessions. And we'll talk about that later on. And he says in verse 16, then in the 4th generation they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. So I want to stop there for just 1 minute. What do you think God told Abraham? He says, I'm not doing all this yet because the iniquity of the Amorites is not complete. What does that mean to you? What do you think that meant to Abraham, and what does it mean to us? What do you think?
He's talking 80 years at least down the road.
Yeah, he's talking about in the future, but why do you think God said, I'm not doing this yet? Because of the Amorites. Their iniquity is not complete. When their iniquity is not complete, what does that mean to you? Not much. But looking back, we ought to have a clue. Larry, you're nodding your head. You got an idea?
Well, on the positive side, he's giving time to repent.
Yes, exactly. God is allowing the Amorites time. It's just like when Jonah went to Nineveh. What did he say? You got how much time? 40 days. You got 40 days, and I'm done. So they repented. They got the message. God is telling Abraham, I'm doing all this, but the Amorites are going to get a chance. They are going to get a chance. But then, when that chance is over, I'm done. Because when the Israelites did get there, what were they told to do? Eliminate them. They had their chance. And that's harsh by today's standards. So God would not just arbitrarily say, I'm taking your land. There was a reason. He's giving them a chance time to repent. They had a chance. Did the Israelites pay the penalty for their sin? Absolutely. They lost their land. Ernest?
He created them, so he had the right to show his power and destroy them. That's his will.
Say that again.
Well, he created them, so he had the right to show his power, destroy them, because he's God.
But did he destroy them arbitrarily? No, didn't. It was because of their sin, and he's giving Abraham that information there. Okay, so I want to keep going. Genesis 50, Joseph said to his brothers, he told his brothers, you thought you were being mean, but God meant it for what? Good, to save it of many people. So Joseph was 17 when he started that journey. In prison, falsely accused of assault, everything that happened to him till he got to this point, and then he had it, he got it, he figured it out. So he said God meant it for that way. Later on in Exodus 9, God tells Moses to tell Pharaoh, I've only let you stay here for this reason, to raise you up, to bring you down, to show I'm God. I'm paraphrasing. In Exodus 9:16, for this reason I have allowed you to remain, in order to show you my power and in order to proclaim my name through all the earth. Still you exalt yourself against my people by not letting them go. Then in Exodus 12, and I'm jumping quick, but I'm wanting to step back and see the plan and how God executed that plan. When they left, they plundered the Egyptians just like he told Abraham they would. And they plundered them and took all that. That's in Exodus 12, 35, 36. Did you say something? Yes, ma'am. Right.
They found favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so they plundered the Egyptians. So it doesn't end up like it begins. They found favor.
Oh, yes. They were mad at him, and then, yeah.
They found favor.
Right.
So it looked to both of them.
Yeah.
That's not exactly the same thing.
Well, they wanted them gone for sure, didn't they? At that particular point, yes. So God told Abraham, you're going to plunder this people, and basically you're going to go out rich. You're going to go out with lots of possessions. But yes, Moses reminds the people in Deuteronomy, he said, you're not that, basically, you ain't that special. You're not that special. In Deuteronomy 9, verse 4, he says, don't say in your heart when the Lord has given them out before you, because of my righteousness, the Lord has brought me to possess this. No, that's not why. But it is because of the wickedness of these nations, in verse 4. It is, in verse 5, it is not for your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart. It's not because you're that good. You weren't. They weren't that good. But it is in continuing on in verse 5, it is because of the wickedness of the nations that the Lord your God is driving them out. Get the last part of this verse. In order to confirm the oath which the Lord your God swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's why he did it, because he told them, I'm going to do this. And that's why he did it. It wasn't because they were so special. It's because he promised Abraham. And so today, and we read this verse last week in Galatians 3, verse 29, if you belong to Christ, you are Abraham's descendants, heirs according to the promise. So that's the culmination of all that. So just real quickly, they were sent. He got them down there. One of the shadows that we'll see later on is the children that were murdered, just like when Jesus was born, children were murdered. There's those shadows out there. But just when you just step back and look, I'm going to just run real quick. Genesis 12, he promised. Genesis 13, he promised. Genesis 15, he promised. Genesis 17, he promised. Genesis 18, he promised. Genesis 22, he promised again, all nations be blessed. He kept telling them. And then the interesting thing, in Genesis 25, Abraham marries Keturah, and she is the mother of Midian. So what's the tie of the Midianites to this whole thing? Huh? Yeah. Moses lived with them. He married a Midianite woman. The Midianites were the one that bought Joseph and took him to Egypt. They were called, they're in that verse there, and I've given you the reference. They were called Ishmaelites and Midianites, but they're the ones that actually took Joseph and sold him to Potiphar down in Egypt. So it's weird how all that stuff turns around. So God favors Joseph. Joseph interprets dreams, and he ends up being in charge of Egypt. So there they are. So if you look at Genesis about 35 all the way through, God's in the process of getting Israel to Egypt. Now in chapter 1 of Exodus, where we're going to be the rest of the lesson, God's starting to get them out. He's got to work towards getting them out. I got them there, now I got to get them out. So in chapter 1, verses 1 through 7, he gives the names of the people who went down there. Here's a key phrase that I want you to get out of verse 1. He says, "These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. They came each with his household." So it wasn't just that guy and his wife. It was their household. And if you remember, as an example, when Lot was captured and he was carried away, and Abraham went to his household and got all the men that could fight in his household, it was 318 men in his household. And so when they came down with their households, it wasn't just his wife and a couple of kids, it was their household, whatever they had. We're not told how many others, but there was the 70 mentioned, but they brought their household. We don't know, we don't know what all else was with them, the number of people. But Abraham kind of gives us a clue. When Lot was captured and he was going to go get him, he could suit up 318 men to go get Lot back. So we need to understand that it wasn't just 70 or Stephen says 75 in the book of Acts. It wasn't just these 70. There were more people that went down there with them. It was just, these are the ones that matter because these are the lineage. These are the ones that are going to carry the lineage. All right, I'm just checking the YouTube channel for any comments from those who are visiting online with us. All right, so they're there. The promise has started to be fulfilled. And so in verse 6, Joseph died, all his brothers, and all that generation, but the sons of Israel were fruitful, increased greatly, multiplied, and became exceedingly mighty, so the land was filled with them. So that was part of the promise to Abraham, wasn't it? For them to become mighty, to become fruitful, to be multiplied. So there's all these peoples, and we know when they left, it was about 600, not counting the women and everybody else and the children. And so put yourself in Pharaoh's shoes. You're Pharaoh. You're the guy. You're in charge. And you got all these immigrants, and I'm using a word that triggers people today. You got all these immigrants in your nation, and they're not you. And they're mighty, and they're everywhere. So you're a politician. That's what Pharaoh is. He's a politician, so he's getting nervous. He's trying to figure out, wait a minute, they might be outnumbering us. We got all these folks down here, and they're not Egyptians. They're Jews. They're not Jews at this point. They're Israelites. So he starts thinking about what's going on there. And that's what leads then to these the rest of the problems that are mentioned, the rest of chapter 1. Now, one other comment that was made in the Truth for Today commentary on this, one thing that the author of that commentary speculated on. He says God's plan was for them to grow and to multiply. He said when they were in Israel with Abraham and the 12, they were shepherds. When they're in Egypt, they were nomads. They were shepherds and nomads. When they're in Egypt, they are shepherds and raising livestock, but they're also farmers. And he said that lifestyle is much more conducive, in his opinion, to your population growing than if you're out wandering across the land of Palestine, that we call today Palestine, wandering around, whereas if they have fixed homes and houses and they're there and they've got crops and they've got and they're taking care of their family, he says they're much more likely to grow and be fruitful because they have a more stable environment. That was just his thoughts on part of why they were able to grow so much, and I thought it was worth mentioning for your consideration. Okay, so now the problem begins. You got the Pharaoh, he's political, he's thinking, and he goes, we got a new king, and he rose over Egypt, and he didn't know Joseph, so he didn't care, you know. He said to his people, behold, the people of the sons of Israel are more and mightier than we. So the immigrants are more populous, and he thinks they're stronger than them. Come, let us deal wisely with them, or else they will multiply, and in the event of war, they will join themselves to those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land. So he appointed taskmaster. I've always had a hard time saying that word. Taskmaster. John may have to get you to say it for me. But anyway, so they appointed these guys over him to afflict them with hard labor. They built for Pharaoh the storage cities of Pithom and Ramses, and the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread out, so that they were in dread of the sons of Israel. The Egyptians compelled the sons of Israel to labor rigorously, and they made their lives bitter with hard labor in mortar and bricks and all kinds of labor in the field, and all their labors which they rigorously imposed on them. I'm reading from the New American Standard. Did you have your hand up?
Was he from another country that had come in and conquered their government, or they've been there 800 years? Well, they've been there a while.
400.
When they went into this type of thing, how long had they been there before all of a sudden the Pharaoh's like, well, just wait, hold on.
Well, it's hard to nail down that time exactly, but I'm guessing 375, 380 years they'd been there or so, and he's starting to get worked up about seeing all of these Israelites running around, and he says there are more of them than us, and they're mightier than us. Do you remember when we studied Timothy and Titus, and the Romans at that time were in control of the world, and they said, you know what, we need to put a mark on all the slaves. They thought that'd be a good idea. And then they realized that there were maybe more slaves than there were free people. And they said, you know, maybe we shouldn't do that, because then they'll know that they outnumber us and they might take over. So the Roman Senate at the time said, no, we're not going to do that. So it's kind of what's going on here. They're realizing, hey, there's more of them, so we've got to figure out what we're going to do. So it says he's going to deal wisely. I much prefer the New King James and the NIV use the word shrewdly, because to me that means you're being naughty, you're being ugly. You know, you're yes, earnest. Ernest, I like you just cut to the chase. Yeah, if he wanted to eliminate the Hebrew problem, yeah, but he might not have been able to. Of course, they probably didn't have any weapons, but they were the ones who were doing the manual labor, so they were probably much more physical, much stronger, more rigorous than the Egyptians who were over them. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, you got a point. Ask Adolf Hitler. All right. So what was Pharaoh's assessment of the situation? He said, I got to do something. Listen, he's a king and he's in charge, but he's a politician. And you know that all the other nobles and all, they're whispering in his ear, you know, hey, Pharaoh, there's a lot of these guys running around here. They're everywhere. What are we going to do? So we got to get this under control. And so that's what he does. His solution to this Israelite problem was to put them to hard labor. So then the Bible uses the phrase, they spread out even more. So did that make the problem better or worse in the eyes of Pharaoh? Worse. It's like, this ain't working. Ernest, did you have your hand up? He's going to try to deal with the elephant in the room, yes. But the reality at this particular point, he has no idea who Jehovah is. He just knows he's got all these immigrants here, and they're outnumbering him. He thinks they're stronger than him, better than him, and so he's got a problem. The guy in power wants to keep power, and if he ever gets to the point where he thinks he might lose his power, he's going to start acting out. He's going to start doing something. The people in power are not going to give up the power without a fight, without doing something. And when you've got no scruples, that leaves it wide open for him, and that's where we are. Okay. Anybody else before we're moving on? No comments online? All right. So verses 15 through 22. So the king of Egypt, then he decides, well, this isn't working. Put them to work. I'm working them like dogs. It ain't working. They're getting mightier, they're multiplying, and they're even more spread out. So he's getting more and more paranoid. And we don't know how much time is going on through here, but enough. So the king spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah, and the other was named Puah. And he said, when you're helping the Hebrew women to give birth and see them on the birth stool, if it's a son, you shall put him to death. So there you go, Ernest. He's gone there. But if it is a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt had commanded them, but let the boys live. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives and said to them, why have you done this thing, and let the boys live? And the midwives said, well, the Hebrew women, they're not like the Egyptian women. They're vigorous, and they give birth before we can ever get there, in verse 19. So God was good to the midwives, and the people multiplied and became very mighty. So they continued to grow. And because the midwives feared God, he established households for them. Then Pharaoh commanded all his people, every son who is born to you, you are to cast into the river, into the Nile. The shadow of what we got going on, what did Herod do when he got terrified? He wanted all the little boys killed. And I think we're starting to see more glimpses of what's going to happen in the New Testament. So we got a Pharaoh who's scared, he's upset. You got Herod who's scared and he's upset. And what do people do who are despots? They do crazy, radical, mean-spirited things. And so they executed innocent children. I want to call you back to one of the theme of the narrative that was in Truth for Today commentary. Nothing works when man opposes God. Even Pharaoh was no match for God. No one can win over God. And I think we're seeing that here. It's not working. They're getting more populous. Is that good English? You pass. You're probably not the best guy to advise me on that, though, are you? Okay. All right. So, why did the midwives disobey Pharaoh? What did the Bible say? They feared God. So, it's okay to lie. Not okay, but... So, is it okay to lie? They lied to Pharaoh.
And that's the difference, is who you lie to.
Oh, so it's okay to lie to a bad guy.
If it fulfills what God...
How do you know you're fulfilling? See, I knew I would start something up tonight.
The whole thing is the purpose
Yes.
And the same thing is what he's trying to get them to do is murder.
Yes.
And we can go down that rabbit hole, but I'm not.
You're not? Okay. This rabbit hole is enough? It didn't say that God was pleased with their lie. He was pleased that they feared him and instead of Pharaoh. John. Technically. Yes. You know, I had a daughter that would come at me like that. It was usually preceded with, "Here's the thing." See, what happened was, yes. You know, it's interesting, you know, Debbie, did you have your hand up? No? Oh. David told a lie when he acted like he was insane once, didn't he? To keep himself alive, probably. The Bible just doesn't say about the lie. But they were rewarded because they feared God as opposed to fearing Pharaoh. They were probably scared of Pharaoh. I look at this and I think about in the first century when the church is being persecuted and a soldier comes up and goes, "Where's the church meeting?" "I don't know." When you're on your way to church. I mentioned last week the church in Saigon is hiding. They move their location every month because they're in fear of getting arrested. There's deception going on there. There's only 10 of them, and they got to change where they worship every month for fear of getting arrested and put in prison. I just raised that, you know, it really doesn't say, and we could probably spend hours debating whether or not it was okay for them to do that. They did because they feared God and just said, and like John said, you know, and the reality is there probably were many of the women who just, you know, they go, "You know what, this is my third baby. I'm good." And we don't know. And these are not the only two midwives. They're probably the midwives who are in charge of a group of midwives. And you know, those of you who have studied history know that a lot of women in the earliest, before there were hospitals and lots of doctors, that other women just helped you deliver the baby. And so that's how it worked. Now, I want to go back to Pharaoh now a little bit. I want to pick on him some more. This is what nations do when they get scared. For you history buffs, do you know, have you heard of the, well, I can't find it, the War Relocation Act? What was that, George?
It's where you took babies or took people away from the neighborhood and put them out places where they couldn't.
I'm talking about the one that the United States put in effect in March of 1942. Yes, we did. Right here in North Little Rock. There was a Japanese farm in Scott, Arkansas, not far from where Karen and I live. There was a camp down south. There was 2 camps in South Arkansas. This is the things that nations do when they get scared. They start dealing with people that they're scared of. So we're not innocent. Our nation is not innocent of those things. Just at least we didn't do that, did we? Yes. Right. Right. We didn't throw anybody in the river. Yeah, we didn't throw them in the river, did we? All right. In the Jewish historian Josephus, he, in his Antiquity of the Jews, he says that there was a wise man who told Pharaoh at this particular time that there was going to be a Hebrew boy who would bring Egyptian dominion low. Now, that's Josephus. You just have to take that with a grain of salt. But if he did have his wise men saying things to him like that, well then yes, a king is going to say, I'm going to do something because I'm not giving up being king. I'm not going to lose any of my power. I don't know if we don't know if it's true or not. Josephus was what, 1st century, the Common Era? So he's writing, I don't know where all of his sources were. Okay, so here we are. The promise of numerous people, it's been partially fulfilled, hasn't it? There's 600. We know that when they left, there was about 600,000 of them. So that promise to Abraham is in the process of being fulfilled. The promise that they would be afflicted, it's been fulfilled. The idea of the things that were being said to them, yes, those promises to Abraham were being fulfilled that Abraham probably didn't fully understand. And the thing to remember is Satan is always going to do whatever he can to thwart God's plan. A couple of commenters mentioned that in their writings on this particular chapter. The only thing I would say is, did Satan really know what the ultimate plan was? I don't know. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. But if Satan was able to eliminate the Hebrew race at this particular point in the history of mankind, what would have been the result of that?
Would have failed the promise.
No Jesus. And so absolutely, if Satan had any inkling of the plan, which I think he probably did, but that's just my opinion, then he's going to do everything he can to try to eliminate this Hebrew race here, right here, with the best chance he may have, because this guy, Pharaoh, is powerful, and he's not scared to kill people. He has no qualms about killing people. So yes, this is a time that Satan could act to stop the plan. There's other places in the Old Testament we could probably see that. But again, no one can thwart God's plan. Now next week, more chess pieces are going to start falling into place. We're going to start seeing Moses and Aaron and those things, and God's moving the chess pieces around the chessboard to get things in place, and we'll see this. God is organized in His way of accomplishing the ultimate, and the ultimate plan is not to get Israel out of Egypt and get them into the promised land. The ultimate plan is to bring the Christ. That's the ultimate plan. And all of these steps have to occur for that plan to come into effect. Now, why do you think all of this is recorded that we're reading? Why do you think it's there?
Prove the lineage of Jesus.
That, what else? To show God how God works. It's to build our faith. I thought of Hebrews 11:1. These things are things that we can see, we can study, and we can see the plan coming into place. And we have the benefit of looking backwards and seeing, oh yeah, I see how that fits together now. And 20/20 hindsight is great, isn't it? Because we have that benefit that we can look back. But these are the things. What did it say in Hebrews 11:1? The evidence of things, what, not seen? We're in Exodus, we are seeing the evidence of things that we didn't see, so that we can walk and understand that God has a plan, so that we know the promises that are being made to us that we're counting on are going to occur. So I appreciate the comments and the thoughts that everyone shared. I appreciate the folks that were online. I want to tell y'all, if y'all have in contact, Miss Barbara Cloninger I talked to her yesterday. She said she was going to be dialing in and sharing with us. If y'all know her, give her a shout out. And she's a great Bible student, as you well know. And so I appreciate her, and there were some other folks that I am not totally aware of. Well, Chad Necessary is on. I appreciate that. He says, interesting, God bless the midwives who lied to Pharaoh. Sounds a bit like Rahab. Good point. Good point, Chad. So anyway, I appreciate the comments, and I'm looking forward as we continue our study. We'll be back here next week. Thanks.